If you'd told me last year that a tomato plant could cause a neighborhood meltdown, I would have laughed in your face. But here we were, me, a single mom with 2 kids and a tiny front yard garden, staring at a $500 HOA violation notice taped to my door like a scarlet letter. The crime, unauthorized agricultural activity. Yeah, that's what they called a 6-foot patch of dirt with tomatoes, basil, and 3 bell pepper plants. My name's Jenna Morales, and getting laid off from my marketing job last year, I started growing my own food to save money. Prices at the grocery store were insane, and my kids loved helping out in the dirt. What started as survival turned into a passion. I never imagined vegetables could get me into legal trouble. But our HOA, Crescent Ridge Estates Association, had other plans. It came on a Tuesday, a plain white envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a neatly typed letter. Ms. Morales, your front yard contains vegetation inconsistent with approved landscaping guidelines. Please remove all edible plants within 10 days to avoid penalties. No phone call, no warning, just a countdown to compliance. I laughed at first. Surely this was a mistake. I wasn't growing cannabis, I was growing carrots. But when I called the HOA office, the manager, a woman named Cynthia, replied with the coldness of a robot. You're disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. And per section 4.6, residential yards shall be reserved for ornamental plants only. I asked if she was serious. She was. That evening, my 8-year-old, Lily, saw me pulling out our cucumber vines and started crying. But Mommy, that's my plant. I gave it water every day. She had, every morning. With her tiny green watering can, I couldn't do it. I stopped mid-tug and left the rest standing. HOA be damned. That's when I decided, if I'm going down for vegetables, I'm going down swinging. I posted a photo of our little garden and the violation letter in a local Facebook group with the caption, apparently growing food is now a crime in our neighborhood. #LetUsGrow. I went to bed frustrated. When I woke up, the post had over 1,500 shares. The comments exploded with support. What kind of HOA bans vegetables during a food crisis? This is outrageous. You're doing a good thing. We need a garden revolution. That day, I received 600 letters from neighbors I'd never met. One elderly couple dropped off a basket of herbs from their backyard and whispered, "We're with you." Just don't tell Cynthia. The idea hit me while I was walking past an old lemonade stand table my kids hadn't used in years. What if I didn't just grow vegetables for us? What if I turned our little yard into a free produce stand for anyone in the neighborhood who needed fresh food? By that weekend, I'd made a painted wooden sign. Free garden groceries. Take what you need. I laid out tomatoes, zucchini, mint, lettuce, and even a jar of our own dried herbs. Kids on bikes rolled by. People waved from their porches. One neighbor dropped off a sack of lemons. The front yard had become something else. Monday morning, the new letter came. This time it wasn't just a warning. It was a formal citation and a fine. $500 per day until removal. $500 for giving away vegetables. I sat on the curb, letter in hand, fighting tears. How could they do this? But then I looked up and saw 3 families lined up at our little table. One woman was holding a bag of tomatoes with shaking hands. She whispered, "My EBT ran out yesterday. This helps more than you know." I didn't cry from sadness anymore. I cried because I knew this mattered, and if the HOA thought a fine would stop me, they had no idea what I was planting next. The letter wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a declaration of war. Failure to comply with HOA landscaping regulations will result in a lien on the property and potential legal action. Daily fines now in effect. It was signed cold and confident by Cynthia Harper, HOA board president, in the kind of ink that probably costs more than my shovel. The garden had become a battlefield, but I wasn't going to be the one to surrender. The next day, I didn't remove the stand. I doubled it. Literally, I added a second table. Neighbors had started leaving extra produce from their own gardens: strawberries, green beans, squash, and even some eggs. Someone even brought hand-labeled jars of homemade jam. I repainted the sign: Community Garden Groceries, free to all. By Thursday, we had volunteers. A retired veteran named Mr. Haynes showed up with a bucket of compost and said, "You've got more courage than the entire HOA combined." The local pastor brought cucumbers. Two teens offered to water the garden after school. It wasn't just a garden anymore, it was a movement. And the HOA, they didn't like that. One night I heard rustling out front around 11 p.m. I grabbed my phone, flipped on the porch camera, and spotted a shadowy figure dumping fertilizer on the sidewalk near the garden bed. Not in a helpful way. In a make-it-look-messy-so-we-can-it way. When I reviewed the footage, I couldn't believe it. It was Stanley, the HOA secretary, in gym shorts, tossing dirt like a guilty raccoon. The next morning I received another letter. Your front yard is creating a public hazard and cleanliness violation. Remove structures and plant beds within 48 hours. That's when I knew they weren't just enforcing rules. They were trying to shut me up. Cynthia made a big mistake. She scheduled an open HOA meeting. And this time I showed up. I didn't come alone. I brought 23 neighbors. We filled the folding chairs in the clubhouse like an organized jury. Everyone wore green ribbons, my daughter's idea. She said it stood for growing hope. When Cynthia saw us walk in, her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. She opened with the usual agenda, ignoring the garden topic. Until I raised my hand, and didn't lower it. I stood, cleared my throat. My voice trembled, but only for a second. I started a garden to feed my kids, and when I had more than we needed, I shared it. That's not criminal, that's community. I looked around the room at the tired faces, the silent nods. I've been fined for growing food. Our community is punishing generosity. And now they're threatening liens over tomatoes. What are we really protecting here? Silence, until Mr. Haynes stood up. I fought in 2 wars for this country. You telling me a woman can't grow food for her family? What's next? Banning lemonade stands and Girl Scout cookies. Cynthia slammed the gavel. That's enough. But it was already too late. The room had turned. 2 days after the meeting, a van from Channel 9 local news pulled up outside my house. The reporter said someone anonymously tipped them off. Thanks, Stanley. They filmed the garden, the produce stand, even my daughter picking cherry tomatoes in her rainbow boots. The headline that night: HOA targets family's free garden stand during inflation crisis. The story went viral. Over 250,000 views on Facebook in 3 days. My inbox exploded. So did the HOAS. And just like that, the board went radio silent. We started receiving envelopes with no return address. One had $20 and a note: "Keep feeding people. You're doing God's work." Another had a child as drawing of our garden with the words, "You are kind." I cried again, but this time I wasn't crying out of fear. I was crying because I realized something huge. They couldn't stop us anymore. The seed had already been planted. 3 weeks after the news story broke, just when I thought the HOA had finally backed off, I got a new letter. This time, it wasn't from Cynthia. It was from a law firm. Inside was a 3-page cease and desist order. Ms. Morales, your unauthorized vegetable stand constitutes commercial activity and public nuisance under Crescent Ridge bylaws. Cease all activity within 72 hours or face civil penalties. They weren't just trying to fine me anymore, they were trying to scare me into submission. Only this time, they messed with the wrong woman. The Facebook group where I first posted the garden update was now filled with thousands of people from across the country. One of them was Ruth Lemieux, a semi-retired land use attorney, and a former HOA board president. She sent me a DM that changed everything. They don't have a legal leg to stand on. Want me to help you fight back for free? She drove down from 2 towns over that same weekend. Ruth wore hiking boots, a sun hat, and carried a binder thicker than Cynthia's rule book. Her first words: "Your HOA is bluffing. Let's compost their argument. I liked her immediately. Ruth helped me pull every Crescent Ridge regulation on land use, zoning, and residential behavior. Here's what we found. The produce stand wasn't commercial. I wasn't selling anything. City ordinance allowed non-commercial front yard gardens for personal and charitable use. HOA bylaws had never been updated since 2001, long before food insecurity was declared a local crisis. In other words, their precious bylaws were woefully outdated and our garden was technically legal. Ruth smiled like a chess master landing a checkmate. Let's go public again. And this time, let's bring the city into it. We launched an online petition titled, "Protect Our Right to Grow Food, Support the Free Garden Stand." Ruth also wrote an open letter to the city council and local paper. Within 4 days, the petition had over 15,000 signatures. Support came in from local nonprofits, a food justice advocacy group, a councilwoman named Angela Tran, who announced a plan to introduce the Edible Front Yards Act. It was becoming bigger than just our HOA. It was a symbol. Then it happened. One quiet Thursday afternoon, I got a knock on the door. It was Cynthia. Yes, that's Cynthia, HOA president. Dressed in her usual beige. She looked tired, flustered. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her in, but I stepped outside. She stood on my lawn, our lawn now, and looked around. Kids were picking strawberries. My neighbor was handing out lemons. The table was full. The garden had never looked better. "This has gotten out of hand," she said. I replied, calmly, "No, this has finally gotten into the right hands." She pulled a folded letter from her purse and handed it to me. The board voted to withdraw the cease and desist. Effective immediately, no more fines. We're rewriting the guidelines. For the first time since this all began. Cynthia looked human. She cleared her throat. I didn't realize how much this meant to people. The garden became more than a rebellion. It became a landmark. People started calling it the free yard market. Local students did their senior projects on food justice. A mural artist painted the side of my garage with fruits, vegetables, and the words, "Grow Together." We were featured on national news. The city council passed the Edible Front Yards Act unanimously. And my daughter Lily, she started a little gardening club at school. Their first project, a lunchroom herb wall, the final twist. At the next HOA election, Cynthia lost her position. Guess who won? Mr. Haynes. At his first board meeting, he said, "From now on, we celebrate neighbors who grow, whether it's flowers, food, or a stronger community." I couldn't have said it better myself. Spring came early that year. The frost melted away, and with it, the bitterness that had hung over Crescent Ridge for months. Something had changed, not just in the bylaws or board, but in the soul of our community. All because of a little patch of vegetables. Where once there were trimmed hedges and silent driveways, now there were people talking over fences. Neighbors traded basil for bell peppers. Kids built bug hotels and planted sunflower seeds. Even Mr. Fitz, who once called my garden a front yard disgrace, asked if he could grow some snap peas on the edge of his lawn. "Don't tell anyone," he said, "but my grandkids actually think I'm cool now." The transformation wasn't flashy. It was quiet, organic, real, and it was just getting started. Mr. Haynes had an idea. As the new HOA president, he wanted to do something bold. What if instead of fining people for growing vegetables, we celebrated them? He launched our first ever Crescent Ridge Garden Day. Flyers went out. Kids made posters. Ruth Yes, our lawyer-turned-legend, offered free Know Your Rights sessions for residents. The highlight, a garden competition, no trophies, just a big painted sign. Most delicious yard to 5 dozens of households joined. Even Cynthia. She surprised us all when she showed up with a small planter box filled with cherry tomatoes and lavender. "They're tougher to grow than I thought," she admitted. We clapped for her anyway. Then came the test no one expected. One sweltering Saturday in June, a citywide blackout struck just before noon. The power grid crashed. No AC, no fridge, grocery stores closed, traffic lights dead. In most neighborhoods, panic would have spread like wildfire. But not ours. We already knew how to share. Within hours, people came to my front yard not for gossip or confrontation but for produce. We handed out bags of lettuce, carrots, cucumbers, and mint water. Teenagers helped chop vegetables for soup. Mrs. Diaz rolled out a portable grill. Mr. Haynes set up solar-powered lanterns he'd been tinkering with in his garage. "This is what real preparedness looks like," someone said. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving together. By nightfall, the garden was glowing under string lights, alive with conversation, laughter, and the sound of community being reborn. Channel 9 News came back this time with a much bigger camera crew. The story aired nationwide. Blackout hits town community garden, becomes emergency hub. NBC, CBS, even NPR reached out. One headline read, "She was fined for growing food, now her garden feeds an entire block during crisis." People from other cities began writing to ask how to start their own free yard markets. Ruth helped draft a free toolkit. I created a community page. The ripple effect was real. We'd built something bigger than a garden. We'd built a movement. Months later, I walked out one morning to find a small sign stuck in the soil. Hand-painted in blue and green, it read, "Grown with love, defended with courage." No one admitted to making it. But it stayed there anchored in the dirt long after the news crews were gone. And every time I saw a neighbor snip herbs for dinner, or a child proudly show off their first zucchini, I remembered the letter that started it all. A fine meant to shut me down. Instead, it opened everything up. I was just a mom trying to stretch the grocery budget. I didn't set out to fight the HOA. I didn't mean to lead a movement. I only wanted my kids to eat real food and know where it came from. But when something is worth growing, it's worth protecting. And sometimes, all it takes is one tomato plant to change an entire neighborhood.